Hi everybody, it's Pascal from ArtOfDrumming and welcome to our mixing video on how to get that Van Halen drum sound. Let's dive right in. Alright, since the drum set was the same for both Hot for Teacher and Jump, I'm going to go over Hot for Teacher here in detail, and then most of what I'm talking about here will also apply to Jump, just with a few minor changes, but we'll get to that. So, starting with the left, first, let's go through the mics real quick. We have overhead left and right, a hi-hat mic which is off because the hi-hat was more than loud enough without a close mic. Then we have a ride mic, which is very important. Snare top, snare bottom. And then for Hot for Teacher, obviously, I played the Roland kick pads, so the main bass drum mics are off. The settings here are for Jump. Like I said, we'll get to that. Then we have the Roto Tom mic, which was placed underneath the lower two toms. Then we have the first floor tom and then the second floor tom, which had the muffin damper on it to make it sound electronic. And then I also used that to trigger a sample of the original Cymbals tom for the intro for Hot for Teacher. So I have that on this track here. The electronic drum pads that we recorded during the playthrough of the song, I didn't use those except for at the very end, and there are two reasons. One, there was actually some double triggering going on, and secondly, I'm also physically not able to play this part super clean. So those two reasons combined, I said I'm just gonna recreate this track with MIDI notes, since it's triggering a sample anyway. So I did that. This is that. Okay, and then as always, we're going into the drum bus. Let's start with the overheads. They're panned hard left and right, and on their own, they sound like this. They have, the first EQ on them is the same for both of them, so at first I'm doing a cut here in the mids, which is actually the snare fundamental. And then I'm also doing a cut at 314, just a little bit. And then I'm doing three things here to the highs to match those to the original. In that case, we have a slight boost at 7.1K. We have another boost at 10.4K, a little bit more. And then also a high shelf boost at 7.5K. So this adds some highs, but it's still not just a cymbal mic this way. I'm not doing a low cut like this because I want some of the mids in there because they are going to give the snare the character that we need. This EQ is the same for both. And then next up, I'm compressing the overhead slightly. Let's listen to just the left one. Just a bit of snare compression here. Ratio is 2.8 to 1, so not that much, not that high. 29 milliseconds of attack, and then 370 milliseconds of release to make sure that while the cymbals ring out, the compressor is not shutting them down or making them sound like they're pumping. Just want a natural, slightly compressed sound. Okay, now the right overhead. And when I hit that China on the right there, you might have noticed that the China has a bit of a mid-rangey sound. That's why I'm cutting only the right overhead at 910 Hertz, minus 4 dB, just to make the right China sound a bit more pristine and high frequency heavy instead of having these mids in there. Like I said, the hi-hat is off. And then the ride mic, which is quite important. Let's go to this section. These EQs are, or these plugins are adjusted in such a way that I'm trying to match a 22-inch Zildjian Z custom cymbal, ride cymbal, to the sound of a Paiste 24-inch ride cymbal. So obviously they're going to sound different in the room. When we compare different rides, it was the closest, but still it's not quite there. So I'm doing a low cut at 2.8K roughly, and then I'm boosting at 10.2K 4 dB just to get the general frequencies into the right range. But then I noticed that Alex's ride seems to have some very piercing high frequencies in the bell area, and our Zildjian ride didn't have that. So I'm doing this very unusual move of turning in 9 dB of 6K in a very narrow way to make it sound like a resonance frequency in the bell. Might sound weird now, but in the mix, especially with the overheads, it makes sense. Just gives it a bit more of that character of the original. And then, since we used a smaller cymbal than Alex did, I wanted to give it just a bit more sustain. That's why I'm using the enveloper, and I'm adjusting the release to 390 milliseconds and turning that up by 22%. And at the same time, I'm also taking down the attack at 32 milliseconds minus 62%, which is quite a lot. But the attack of this cymbal is actually coming from the overheads. And I want to get just the character and the volume overall of the ride cymbal from the close mic. That's why I'm taking out the attack, boosting it this way, and doing this weird EQ, because in combination with the overheads, it makes it sound like the original. Panning wise, like I said, the overheads are hard left and right, and then the ride is 20 to the right. Next up, we have the snare top. Usually I like to flip the phase of snare top mics in relation to the overheads, but in this case I listened back and forth with the phase flipped and with it not flipped, and it sounded better actually with it not flipped. So I'm not doing that. So this is what the snare top mic sounds like dry. Already has a lot of the Alex Van Halen characteristics, for me at least. Speaking of which, I would say Alex Van Halen's snare sound has 3 key frequencies that have to be there. There's the fundamental of the drum. Then there's the pitch of the top head, which is ringing out, which is this. Okay, I'm going to correct myself. It's actually 4 frequencies. Then we have one overtone, which is this, 460. And then we have the resonance of the shell at 535 Hertz. And those have to be in the right place. They're there because it's the right drum and the right tuning, but they have to be adjusted in a way that fits the original. And that's why I'm doing these moves, taking out some of the shell, turning in some of the overtone, And I'm also boosting a little bit of the attack. Ich muss mal kurz ein Ladekabel holen.
Was soll ich dir jetzt geben?
Komm grad rüber.
Oder hast du jetzt hier auch?
Ich habe jetzt dabei.
Müssen wir dir nur noch irgendwie eine Steckdose erschaffen da hinten. Das ist in der Wand noch was. Wie lange ist das? Ja, das ist lang genug. Ja, das ist so ein kleines.
Hat er den jetzt? Was ist denn jetzt los? Okay, hat ihn verwirrt. War kurz durcheinander. Ja, ja. Mal weitermachen.
Kannst du kurz was abspielen vom Rechner? Klingt alles sauber.
Okay.
Wir können einfach weitermachen.
Next up, we have a compressor. Pretty standard settings for everything. Just a bit faster attack than usual. 23 milliseconds and then 160 milliseconds of release. Ratio is 4:1 roughly. And then I'm compressing it lightly to especially shape the attack of the drum. Makeup gain is corrected so that it's the same volume. The next EQ, I'm taking out 1.2K, quite a bit. And I'm also boosting some 6.7K to get a bit more attack. Next up, I'm simulating some of the tape qualities that the original has. Basically, sacrificing quality, rather, by using this distortion plugin, overdriving it 9 dB, and correcting the output gain to make sure it's the same volume after. This also helps level out the snare hits to make sure that they're all at the same volume. Another EQ, another low cut. You might wonder why. The reason is the distortion plugin always adds artificial low end, which I don't want, so I'm cutting just below the fundamental. I'm taking out some more of these high mids here, I guess, 2.2K, minus 4 dB, and then I'm also boosting some more highs for more attack, 8K. And then the enveloper, in this case, I'm just taking out a little bit of the sustain. So I would set to 140 milliseconds and minus 10%. Okay, next up, snare bottom. Here I am flipping the phase because one of the snare top and bottom always has to be flipped. In this case, since I didn't flip the top, I'm flipping the bottom. And then I'm just cutting everything below 3.3K. That's it. Okay, now for the fun part. This is the Simmons kick that I re-recorded through MIDI. one thing that I noticed was in this sampler here, I have the original kick sample that I got from a YouTube video where someone showed the individual tracks. So I cut out that sample, and when I listened back like this, I noticed that it doesn't sound the way the kick sounds in the original song. So I had to do some EQing. The main thing that I had to do was boost at 60 Hertz quite a bit, because although the fundamental of the Simmons kick sample that I have is the same, there seems to be some low end below that in the original song. And it goes all the way down to 60 Hertz. And I'm doing this to create kind of an even downfall of frequencies from the fundamental of the sample itself. That is at 130 Hertz, believe it or not. It's the lowest that the kick is doing. It's actually higher than the tom in the beginning. And then, like I said, this boost helps make this fall evenly. I also removed just a little bit of the fundamental at 130 Hertz. And I also boosted the attack, which in this case is quite low for a kick, I think. 2.5K, 5 dB. And I cut everything above that. And this makes it sound more like the original. So my lesson from this is, even though you might use a sample, it might not necessarily be the same sound. Next up, we have the Roto Tom mic. It is not panned because it's used for a lot of different mics that are in different places. So I'm just panning that right in the center. The Roto Tom itself is played in the beginning here. So dry, it sounds like this. Then I'm EQing that. I'm cutting below the fundamental of the lower Roto Tom, which is here. Boosting some attack at 6K. Then I'm compressing that. 41, 30 to 60. Then the enveloper, I'm adding a bit more attack, 44% at 18.5 milliseconds. And then I'm adjusting the EQ. I'm taking out some fundamental, at least from the lower tom. The higher of the second lowest Roto Tom is this, and its fundamental was a bit lower than that of the lower Roto Tom, so I'm boosting that a bit. This evens out the sound nicely. The reason I don't have it up here with the fader is that I'm also getting a lot of this Roto Tom from the overhead mics. And I just want to support that with the close mic. Okay. Next up we have Floor Tom 1, which is the one that was not muffled. So let me find a spot where I'm actually playing that. Here. Okay. What I'm doing to this is basically standard for toms as well. Boosting the fundamental, cutting just above that, boosting some attack, and also compressing it slightly. And I'm panning that to the right. And also when we listen to all of the toms together, I want to make sure that the fundamentals of them are all in the same spot, but we'll get to that. Next, we have floor tom 2, which is the muffled one. Let's go to the intro for that. Not a very pretty sound, but it's not about pretty, it's about the original. So the first thing I did here was cut these low mids here. The fundamental of around 90 Hertz is the same. Or I tuned the drum to fit the sample, which I added later. The idea was that I was trying to make the acoustic tom sound as electronic as I could, and then add the sample just a little bit. And then with the two combined, the acoustic tom is going to give me a little bit of the analog 80s Simmons fluctuation in the attack that you can hear in the original. And then the sample itself is going to be the steady part in the sound, if that makes sense. So I'm cutting more mids here, boosting a lot of attack, high shelf at 3.3K. Then I'm shortening the sound, release at 170 milliseconds, minus 76%. Another EQ, more fundamental and mids especially are removed. And then this right here, as you can see, these mountains here are not really attack. I would say they're more of the resonance inside of the shell. I don't think that's pretty, and it's not present in the original, so I'm cutting some of that. Also cutting some highs from the boost that I did before. You might wonder why. It's because I want this whole region to be boosted, and then I'm adjusting the high cut in such a way that I'm left with those highs that I really need. And then, since the original sample is dry, I'm adding some reverb only to this tom. So I'm keeping the dry signal, obviously, pretty long decay. Everything is flat. I've got the airy setting, removing some highs because I want the reverb to act just in the mids. And one more EQ. Minus 12 dB at 4K and some more highs boosted. And you might wonder why I'm doing all of this. It only makes sense when you listen to the sample. So let's do that now. What I did for mixing was I triggered the hits here through MIDI. They are just normal MIDI hits. They have some dynamics inside of them. They're not all at the same volume. And they're triggering this sample. Which is from the original song. And in order for this to sound a bit more natural, I'm adding the acoustic sample. So it's not all the same volume, it's got a bit of life to it. It's going up and down because of the acoustic drum. It still sounds a bit more machine gunny than I would have wanted, but I wasn't able to get it any closer. But yeah, I think this is a good compromise. With just the sample, it sounds very machine gun-like. And with just the tom, you notice that the two have to work together. And then I'm just doing some minor tweaks to the sample here. I'm removing some of the fundamental, adding a bit more attack up here. And then I'm also removing this resonance frequency. Okay. One thing you might have also noticed is those two are not panned to the right where I played them for the intro. However, when we go to a fill, for instance this one, you'll notice that they are. That's because I actually wrote some panning automation. For the intro, I want it to be in the center, like in the original, and then when I'm playing the toms as a fill, I want them to be in the spot where you can also see them. So that's why the pan automation is there. They're off to the very right, obviously, so I'm doing quite a hard panning here for a tom, 45 to the right. And then we have the drum bus. But before we get to that, I suggest we listen to what we've got for a moment. Oh, sorry. Okay, the first thing on the drum bus is an EQ. I'm just taking out a little bit of highs, especially from the hi-hat. Just a little bit here. It's barely audible. Then I'm compressing everything. Basically, since the kicks are always the same, the snare is the only thing that activates the compressor at this light setting. And it helps glue everything together. 3-to-1 only. And these are also pretty standard here, the attack and release settings. Yeah, so now we have the glued together nice kit. Now the last thing is to add some more tape quality. So I'm using the Chroma Glow plugin, which is still fairly new in Logic. I'm using the magnetic setting for tape. Style is clean, and I'm driving that 29%. And it just helps it get that 80s tape kind of quality. So now let's listen back with the playback. I'm the teacher. I've got it bad, so bad. One thing that I would have liked to do is, well, we made the compromise to use a set of hi-hats that Alex didn't, which I think is fine. However, when I played the song, I just loosened up the screw on the hi-hat clutch and it dropped down. And that was the setting I used, because I think that's also what he did back in the day. But since we use different cymbals, our cymbals, hi-hat cymbals, reacted differently to that than Alex's did. And that's why they're not really having the same sustain. They're quite present in the beginning and then they go down pretty quickly. And since they're so loud in the overheads, because I played them a bit too loudly, there is really no way for me to lengthen the sound and make the initial attack lower. If I played them not as loudly, I could have used the hi-hat mic and done that, and that's exactly what I tried here, to just get the sustain up. But when I added this, the hi-hat had the right length, but was way too loud, so I couldn't do that. But I think as a compromise, it still works in the mix. It has the same basic character, and I'm very happy with the result. I think the main difference is the hi-hat, but yeah. Now for the beginning. Don't know what that is. I think that was from where I had the project originally to learn the song. I must have had a sample in that spot and forgot to mute it. Yeah, I think I'm not quite there with the intro, with the beginning. But just while we're here, I think if you look at these two transients here, this is from where he hits one of the pads, and this right here is clearly, to me at least, his sticks hitting together. And I think that, once and for all, should bust the myth that it's an engine running at the beginning. It's definitely not a Lamborghini engine. If so, if it was an engine, it would have been a shovelhead Harley Davidson engine, which it also isn't. To me, it's clear that it's a Simmons pad, and he's actually hitting his sticks together. Yeah, just as a side note. I don't know why his Simmons pad sound in the beginning has a bit more dynamics. It goes up and down. The attacks are always different. I think it's probably the analog triggering they had back in the day. Now with digital triggering, I think it's a lot more precise and there is less fluctuation, which is cool in a way, but it also makes our or my mix here sound a bit flatter than the original, but there is no way around that. But yeah, that's it for this song, I think. Now let's jump over to the jump session and continue on. Okay, this is the jump session. When I mixed those two songs, I used the same session for most of the mixing process, and just in the end, I saved a copy of this session as Hot for Teacher, and then I continued to work on the details there. And for jump, I made a few minor changes, but the basic idea is the same. So all of these EQs here and settings are all the same. The snare also has the same amount of plugins on it. Compression is the same. The only difference is going to be in the EQs. In this case, I'm not cutting as much of the shell out here as I did before. This is all the same. The Roto Toms are basically the same. They're only a bit louder compared to what we had before, and they have some reverb on them, like this, because I thought that that helped give them the character from the intro fill. But yeah, the rest is the same, except for this gate, which I had to do because I had to level the mic louder and it compromised the snare drum sound. So I gated the Roto Tom mic and automated that so that it worked correctly. The Simmons kick is not being used, obviously. And the main difference now is actually the kick drums. Kick drum 2 is the main kick, and it has 2 EQs and a compressor on it. So let's take a listen to the main kick soloed and dry. Actually sounds pretty similar to a Simmons kick, or you could also say it's the other way around. A Simmons kick sounds similar to an 80s style normal kick. But yeah, the idea is to have a fundamental which is actually quite high, since I think in the original it was a Simmons pad, and I used the acoustic drum for this song. But the main thing I'm doing here is cutting all of the actual low end out of the drum. Everything below about 100 Hertz is cut off, and then I'm boosting 110 Hertz 11 dB to make that the new fundamental. I think without this EQ it actually sounds better, but it's not a question of better, it's a question of does it match the original. Then I'm cutting a little bit of mids here at 236 Hertz, which is just an overtone in the drum. And by the way, the reason I'm able to boost any frequency is because when we recorded the drum, I was looking at the analyzer and making sure that there are frequencies in this entire range so that I could manipulate them in the mixing process and accentuate the ones that are present in the original. As you can see, there are frequencies all over this place. Could have also boosted 60 Hertz, but I'm not. I'm boosting 110, obviously. Okay, that's the main part done. Now that the low end and attack are in an approximate relation within each other, I'm then compressing everything. Standard settings. And then I'm using another EQ to boost a little bit more of the fundamental and take out a little bit of the attack. I didn't know, or I didn't want to search exactly for the frequency, just everything above, in this case, 690 Hertz roughly. I'm just lowering down, so I'm catching the attack as well as some higher mids, just making the fundamental more present in relation. And that's the same for both kick drums. Let's find a spot where I'm actually hitting both so that we can compare their sound. I think they sound pretty similar. Okay, and then the drum bus is the same, so all that's left to do is listen back and forth between the original and my mix. Might as well jump. Go ahead and jump, jump. Go ahead and jump. Oh, hey you, who said that? Baby, how you been? You say you don't know, you won't know until you begin. As always, I was looking at the analyzer, making sure that the kick fundamental, snare fundamental, and overtones and everything else is in the same region. One thing you might have noticed is that my kick in this section we just listened to seems to have a bit more attack. And that is true. The reason is, again, as with the Simmons pad in the beginning of Hot for Teacher, I think there is a lot of fluctuation in the volume of those analog Simmons modules, and sometimes the attack is louder or the whole sound is louder and then it's softer again, and I was aiming to find kind of a middle for our actual acoustic kick sound, which didn't have as much fluctuation. So this is my middle. Sometimes in the original there are kick hits that are more present and some are less present, like those we just listened to, and I think I'm hitting right in the middle. Okay, as you can see, the room mics are off again. Now looking back, it makes sense because I think at Eddie Van Halen's studio at 5150, I think it's called, they had very little space when they recorded this album, which is also why he played electronic drums, because they took up less space. And there were no room mics because it was just a small room. Everything you could get from that room was on the overheads, and that was it. So that's why it makes sense that I didn't find the need for any room mics. One thing we haven't done, I just noticed, is listen to the Roto Toms by themselves with the reverb on them. And then the gate is closed. Compared to the original. You can also hear the first kick hit in the original is what I talked about a minute ago. It's very, very loud. Pay attention to the kick. It's very present. Mine is not as present. Mine is more present in the chorus. So yeah, I think I found the middle. And I think that also wraps up our mixing videos on Van Halen. So I hope that this was helpful or interesting to you. If you have any other tips, whatever, be sure to tell us in the comments. Like and subscribe. See you next time. Take care.